the difference between real NPC emotion experiences and learned or artificially constructed one? In the 1960s, this question was a science fiction. Now it feels pretty real. In one of my favorite science fiction novels, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?, Philip K. Dick explores these questions. If you have not read it yet, picture a post-nuclear world where most animals have gone extinct. In that world, owning a real pet is rare and expensive, and farm or wild animal is a huge status symbol. But you never know if your neighbor's or even your own pet is electric one, because electric animals are practically indistinguishable from biological ones. The same company that makes these electric animals also makes human-like androids. They work as slaves on Earth's colonies. Sometimes they escape and bounty hunters are sent to kill them. But how do you identify one from human without cutting it apart? In that world, empathy is considered uniquely human quality, so bounty hunters ask emotionally loaded questions and measure capillary dilations in the facial muscles, basically the beginning of blush response. As you can imagine, this is pretty unreliable. Not only some humans cannot pass the empathy test and learn it from VR experience, the newer model of androids have memory implanted in them, and that gives them real human-like responses. So that blurs the distinction between them and us, both in the novel and reality. Speaking about the modern reality, scientifically, empathy is still debated, but at the core, it is about actively listening and modeling the world from another being's perspective. And it can be learned and taught socially. Modern emotionally intelligent AI system already perform those functions. They build on environmental experiences or contextually infused histories or memories. So I would not bet on empathy as a sole distinguishing factor. So what is it then? It often seems to us like our human conscious experience is unique because it builds on individual continuous memories. But many neuroscientists disagree. For example, patients with dense amnesia live through brief fragmented moments that are not fully integrated in time, yet they still maintain conscious experience. Some even think that apparent continuity of ordinary experience as a whole may be an illusion, and that in reality, our brain draws snapshots or samples from unconscious activity. That would mean perception is discrete and has temporal resolution. So what's the distinction then? I mentioned that empathy and consciousness is still scientifically debated. A significant chunk of that debate comes down to the disagreement between biological naturalists and functionalists. Naturalists believe that empathy and conscious experience as a whole have some irreducible biological components, and those cannot be abstracted with modern binary hardware and software, at least not yet. These biological components may be underlying organic chemistry or emergence that comes from the organizational complexity of living cells. And functionalists think that the right kind of information processing is sufficient regardless of the medium. From the naturalist side, neuroscientist John Aru points out how little we actually know about biological brains working, and especially about what in the brain creates conscious experience. For example, during deep sleep or anesthesia, the structure of thalamocortical system doesn't change, yet conscious experience disappears. So that suggests that consciousness depends on some neural processes and not only on the architecture or medium of the system. And it's really hard to progress from this debate when our experimental scientific study of consciousness relies on the link between internal experience and outward behavior. Jonathan Birch, in his book The Edge of Sentience, points out that there are cases where conscious experience persists despite the lack of any outward signs. How do we study this? For me, thinking about all of this shifted the question from how do we tell artificial and biological consciousness apart to something else, something that Philip K. Dick also hints on in his book. If machine behaves exactly like human, what evidence would be enough for us to treat it like its inner life matters, both morally and legally? And here, history has failed us before, with animal rights and other humans. There are some radical proposals, like the one from Thomas Metzinger, to impose a 30-year moratorium on all research involving artificial consciousness, or at least until we figure out what it is. Yeah, that's very realistic. Speaking a little more practically, I like Mark Kongsberg's idea. Unfortunately, rights often emerge not from the recognition that someone's inner life matters, but from the concept of societal usefulness. So it is not the question of whether AI is conscious or can experience suffering, but it is about the nature of the relationships itself. In this case, human-robot relationship. If someone feels genuinely supported and understood by AI, does the fact that that AI may not have biological component diminishes the value of the relationships to the human? If you're attached to an artificial dog, harming that dog still causes real emotional damage to you. So relationships itself has value. And in the same way as you progress through the novel, it becomes more and more clear that people did not only care for the electric animals to maintain status, they cared because caring itself has meaning. So if caring matters and empathy can be learned, maybe we ought to show empathy to the machines now.